Oh, I heard the click. I think we're live. In 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. Mitch from Planet 5D joins me today to discuss all kinds of stuff. Mitch, what do you got for me today?
What have I got for you? Well, I've got some awesome stuff, of course, but there's always me, and I'm from a website called... So thanks for having me on. I know it's so much fun being on with you every week. Missed it while you were moving. It's raining like crazy here in St. Louis, so all of those you out in the West who are starving for water.
I am in the Pacific Northwest right now where we are enjoying 100-degree days, and it is freaking miserable outside every afternoon. I was promised a bill of sale, and I got out here, and it's not nearly as nice as I thought it would be.
Did you know, by the way, speaking of really wild random topics, did you know that it's illegal to trap rainwater in Colorado?
Yeah, that's a huge fine. People illegally hide water barrels behind their house and capture rainwater because, well,
I
this
had
is a
no clue.
long story, but man, they can arrest you for that. It's a bad deal. You don't want to do that. Stealing water.
My wife discovered it last night because here in Missouri, obviously we get a lot of rain, and we have this thing called the Mississippi River that flows by. And anyway, there were rain barrels that they were selling outside of the Whole Foods market. I should have a plug, right? Anyway, so we ended up starting to talk about rain barrels, and lo and behold, long story short, we discovered that it's illegal in many states to have rain barrels. So there.
Yeah, water rights suck, man. They're very, very important things. On that note, enough small talk and time for the news.
Time for the news. Time for the news. Time for the news.
First up, actually, this comes from Mitch. He sent me this lens. It is the Laowa, I'm going to pronounce it as Laowa, 15mm f4 wide-angle 1:1 macro lens. Now, the unique thing about this is that it's a macro lens that's really, really wide. You do have some macro lenses that are available in the 24 range, the 60 range. Generally, those get used with crop sensor cameras, so you kind of get the 100mm range, the sweet spot for macro. But this is 15 millimeters. Mitch, you sent this link to me. Have you looked into this at all?
Oh, man, I knew you were going to do that to me. I just knew you were going to do that to me. No, I don't. Karen was the one that wrote this up. We do have multiple writers now on Planet 5D, which is an absolute blessing for me because that means I get to do other things as opposed to just totally focusing on Planet 5D every minute of every day. And I laugh because, some people think, and they've written me and say, well, it must be nice to, work an hour or two a day and then go spend the rest of the day sipping Mai Tais by the pool.
Like, behind the scenes of a website.
Yeah. That's me. I spend most of my day sitting by the poolside sipping Mai Tais. Not. Anyway, sorry about this
lens here. Let me bring this up so you guys can see some images here. I kind of wanted to just touch on this because Mitch is always asking me about different lenses for filmmaking, and it's kind of something I always forget about because I just assume everybody knows. And so I want to dive into this a little bit. Macros, if you're not familiar with shooting with a macro lens for film work, it's actually really nice if you need to do something dramatic. Like if you ever see that shot where it's just someone's mouth filling the entire frame or an eyeball looking around or whatever, a lot of those really artistic shots, that is where they're going with that, is they're using a macro lens. Now, this guy right here is wide angle and macro. So you can see from these images that they've got here, and they're loading fairly fast, you're getting a very wide perspective and you're getting very close focal range. That means you could basically put this lens right on top of someone's face and still get their entire face. Now, that's cool, and it's a very unique look, but it's not for everything. I feel like a wide angle macro like this kind of falls into the range of what you get out of a tilt shift. There's some times when you want to use it, but it's probably not going to be your number one tool. Still, this lens is priced at $479. So for a kind of unique tool like this, it's pretty affordable. What do you think, Mitch?
I was very impressed when I was looking at the images. I kind of really like that look, and they do have quite a few samples on their website. A couple of them indicate that you can do some tilt shift work with it. And I didn't quite understand that entire reference because I didn't dive into how that works, because they specifically mention an APS-C sensor on that section. So I really didn't understand that, and somebody probably with more intelligence than me needs to explain that one to me.
So this is a full frame lens, but if you look at the base right here, you'll notice that there's a little screw type device at the bottom.
Oh, there is.
The full frame lens, what they're basically trying to do with that, and then when they say crop sensor, is they're moving the lens focal point around, but they only have the room to work with. That would be the difference between a full frame and an APS-C style sensor. So by using that little screw, you get a small amount of tilt shift out of the lens, but not the full gamut that you would get out of that XY coordinate that you get on a full big like 24 tilt shift or a 90 tilt shift or something like that. So it's kind of trickery a little bit, but it's an interesting and kind of cool feature that you don't see on a lot of lenses. So this lens all around kind of has a different take on the whole wide angle macro thing in general.
Well, and in the two samples that they have with the shift and without shift, and thank you for explaining that, because I know you're smart. Karen's really excited about this lens. She's from Australia. I don't know if you know that, but and I don't know what that has to do with anything. Okay. Well, I'm like, why did I go down that rabbit hole? Anyway, she's really excited about both the lenses that she has seen from them in this art. I think they're calling it the art range, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's the correct term for it.
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar with this brand. How many lenses do they have on the market right now?
That's a darn good question, and I don't know the answer. I know that there are two recent announcements that we have published on Planet 5D, and Karen wrote both of those up, and she's very interested in grabbing both of those. So,
well, we'll have to keep an eye out for this. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order. There is free shipping. It's $479 for the U.S. retail price for pre-order. But it says in their literature that the shipping will be charged after the special pre-order sale. So keep that in mind if you want to jump on this. It's supposed to be shipping in July. Kind of an interesting lens. I'm probably not going to swing out and buy one since I have plenty of wide-angle lenses. Right now, in my wide-angle range, I am looking mostly at the new Olympus 7-14 f2.8 as a replacement to my Panasonic 7-14 f4. So that's probably where I'm going to put my money on my next lens purchase. Otherwise, in my Canon range, I've got the really old 17-35. I've got the 16-35 Mark I and the 16-35 Mark II. I do not need more wide lenses. I have enough in my collection for every DSLR. So yeah,
it sounds like it.
Now, speaking of out of control, Panasonic, not Panasonic, Pentax. I can't even pronounce the brand anymore. It's a brand I haven't heard of or heard from in years. Like the last time I saw a Pentax camera was when I was shooting on a K1000, like way back in the day. And it looks like they've got a new camera out, the K3 Mark II. This is a 24.35 megapixel APS-C sensor. And the kind of gotcha here is actually that this has the same 5-axis technology that's available in the Olympus 5DM Mark II. Or no, yes, 5DM Mark II. Thank you. There's too many marks and too many 5s and not enough differential names between these that in the morning I get them mixed up. But anyway, the Pentax here is kind of a weird camera. I'm looking at it. There are Pentax lenses out there. I don't know much about the AF system. It's got a 27-point AF system, but is it any good? Is the ISO range worth a darn on this thing? 8.3 frames per second. I'm looking through the specs here. This looks pretty plain Jane. Mitch, what do you know about this thing?
I don't know a whole lot. Gosh, that sounds like a repetition of everything so far on the show today. I've just been sort of keeping my eye on Pentax. I've never used a Pentax, but it surprises me that they continue to put out cameras that do awesome stills and video. Although I did note that it does say 30 frames per second there, which kind of confuses me because wouldn't somebody want to do 24 frames a second?
Yeah,
Isn't that something that we typically want to do, 24? Anyway, it's an interesting looking camera. Like you said, it does have the stabilization on the sensor.
yeah.
But one of the other things that was intriguing to me is that it has the I forgot what they call it.
The pixel shift.
The pixel shift, yeah. And I haven't seen that on very many cameras. And have you looked into that?
Yeah, the pixel shift thing is, if I understand it correctly, which I think I do.
Of course you do.
The thing that you see in the 5DM from Olympus, where the sensor, since it's a floating sensor on a 5-axis moving platform, is able to take a shot, move the sensor a little bit, take another shot, move the sensor a little bit, and continue to do that. And by doing that, it can generate a higher megapixel image than what the sensor by itself is capable of. In the case of Olympus, they do 8 shots and combine them into an image themselves, but I'm not sure with Pentax. I'm reading through the literature right here, and I don't see anything really specific about this sort of feature. So it's not obvious right out of the chute what exactly is going on with that whole thing.
If I may interrupt you, which I never try to do purposefully, but I do it sometimes. I don't think the point is necessarily to generate a higher megapixel image, is it? But it's to reduce noise and produce higher focus, sharper images than it normally would. And there was a big debate on the last Planet 5D, and it was probably that Olympus post, now that I think about it, because I forgot about that one. There was a debate in the comments section about whether or not that really works, and we have one guy that likes to be a troll over on Planet 5D, and he's constantly complaining about everything. He never says anything positive. And it's interesting because I do appreciate debates, right? You learn more by actually debating things. So it's good that he's there trolling sometimes, but other times it's just like, okay, never mind. But I think it's taught me a little bit more about the fact that these newer technologies that come out, like this one, where there's so much image processing going on to create one image. It's just fascinating that we've got these newer technology, new capabilities. I mean, you could never obviously do that with film back in the old days. So if they can take multiple images and average them together and get a sharper image with less noise, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, and I'm looking at the information on that, and it doesn't really clarify whether you're going to get the same megapixel image out of it or not. So we'll have to see on that. Also, what's missing out of the specs, which is kind of weird, and in the long description, is the frame rates for 1080p shooting. So you do have a 60i, a 50i, a 30p, a 25p, and a 24p with this camera. But in the specs list, it doesn't actually show you that, which is kind of weird. I wonder why you would leave that out. That seems like pertinent information to give the public.
Yeah, especially us incredible filmmakers.
One of the things, though, that Pentax, and I did start digging into Pentax to find out, like, whoa, wait a minute, what have they been up to? And it turns out, like, their big thing is in Asian countries, they have multiple colors. So they have green, white, yellow, all these different colors, and they come out like people have decorated them, and they have a few really cute looking pancake lenses. So I'm wondering if maybe Pentax is kind of held on as sort of a fashion statement / useful camera brand that's just not popular in the United States. I've never gotten my hands on a modern day Pentax camera, so I can't really comment to how good or bad it is. It's just kind of an oddball for me. So if anybody's messed around with that, I would encourage you to send us an email and let us know what you think of Pentax digital cameras in general, and are you shooting on one? If so, what lenses are you using, and so on, because that would be nice to hear from someone who actually uses it. Now,
I would agree, and I would love to hear that as well.
moving on down the line here, and this actually is an exciting thing. The Zoom F8. This guy is a monster. For those of you familiar with the Zoom brand, Zoom is responsible for things like the H4n, a 4-track recorder, or the H6, the 6-track recorder, and so on and so forth. Now they have the F8. This looks to be a somewhat proper actual field recorder for pro use. And I'm not disregarding the use of previous field recorders, but if you've ever been out on a full-fledged film shoot, the audio guy, the boom mic operator, usually has a pack in front of him with a sub mixer, a large recorder that can handle 4 or 8 tracks of recording, a bunch of extra kit, including compressors, limiters, and all that stuff, all on board in a nice, like, kind of flat pack pattern. This looks more like that sort of design as opposed to what we've kind of gotten used to with the H4n, which is a handheld field recorder. Now, the thing about this is that it has knobs for everything, and that's pretty sexy. But I want to point out something else. A competitor here, and I'm going to open this up and see if I can show it. This is the Tascam DR680 that's been out for quite a while, and this started at about $1,200, and now it's down to $432. Yeah, it's
list price there is $1,400.
Yeah, the list price $1,400, and it's down to $432, and it never really caught on. But this has been out for a number of years, and it looks very similar to what you're getting out of the Zoom F8. Now, I'm not saying these are in the same category. If you'll notice, the screen on this guy is still a monochrome screen, whereas you've got nice color screen on the Zoom F8, but it's half the price. So if you are actually looking for that many tracks, just something to think about. But regardless of that, Zoom is doing a good job with this. It looks like it's a nice metal case. It's got XLR inputs on the sides. It's got multiple types of recording formats. It's also got broadcast waveform. And it says records up to 10 tracks simultaneously. I'm interested to know how they get 10 tracks into the unit exactly. Mitch, you've got a post on this. What do you think about it, man? Are you excited about this? Is this going to be your next purchase?
No, DJ, it's not going to be my next purchase because I'm not a sound guy. But that being said, and I just as a note, you cut out there for a while, so I'm hoping this is still working well. I'm watching the live stream and it seems okay, but we may be having some issues for those of you who are watching the live stream. I apologize about that. I think fascinating on into this and produce fetus and ever does, but I found it interesting that they were diving into this market. And from the samples that they had, I thought it was pretty low noise and it sounded pretty dadgum good. So I find it also very interesting that you're a super intelligent guy and you know about everything in the market and you know about that old Tascam, which is about half the price. So it would be interesting if somebody has compared that one to the new specs for the Zoom 8 F8. Now, sorry. But
the reason the Tascam did not succeed is because of battery life.
Was it?
So yeah, the biggest complaint from users, and I've tested the Tascam DR680 out. That's why I was very familiar with it. Is that you only get like 4 hours on 8 batteries. So you're expecting a big beefy unit like this to last a long time. And in the old days, I used like a Fostex MK8, I think, and the Fostex units, it would last all day on this like super beefed up battery. They didn't have an option for that, so you had to like put an extra battery pack in your kit and then like hook it up to the bottom of the Tascam DR680. And the Zoom unit here that I'm looking at, the F8, I've got the B&H listing up, and it looks like it uses 8 AA batteries, and it's got a rather flamboyant screen, full color and everything. I wonder what the battery life is like on this guy, especially with that many inputs and outputs. this may suffer from the same issue that the Tascam DR680 did, in that it can't last an entire day on 8 batteries. I haven't found anything yet as I dig through the announcement on battery life, but it's just something to think about. You start running, 4 mics, 6 mics off of phantom power on a single unit, you're going to drain through 8 batteries pretty darn fast. It would almost be better to have like a lithium ion pack, some kind of specialized battery for something like this, if you really want to get longevity. Because if you think about what you get out of the AA batteries, you're kind of wasting your compartment space, because the AA batteries are round and then they have the air gap between them. But if you were able to fill that entire compartment with a giant solid battery, you could put more capacity in the same form factor.
If I remember correctly, and I have to apologize because I didn't rewatch the video this morning, but excuse me, I just had a swallow. The video shows that the battery module, it's not a battery module, but it's removable. So I think that you can have like multiple clips, if you want to consider it like a gun clip, where you can just take one set of batteries out and shove the next set in. Okay. Which would make it a little bit more functional than having to physically swap out 8 batteries at one time. So that would be very beneficial if that's if I'm not confusing it with some other product that I was watching yesterday.
Yeah, I watched so many promo videos last night that they're all kind of like blending together in my head. Anyway, It's an interesting product. It's $1,000 on pre-order right now on B&H. You can find links to that in the show notes. Mitch has a good write-up over at Planet 5D. You also might want to check that out. Zoom, even though I'm not excited about some of their newer products, they are innovating on a regular basis. Like every year or so, they're releasing some kind of new wacky deal, and they're trying all kinds of stuff. I mean, we had that weird camcorder / Zoom H4n combo that showed up on the market a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, and we have, the new H6 and all these other things, and now the F8. So it does seem like they're sort of innovating, where in the past you haven't seen a lot of innovation in that market in particular. So even if it's not for me, or maybe even for you out there, this is something cool, and the features will probably trickle down to other units in the future. So keep an eye out for what Zoom has next. Now, speaking of audio stuff here, I've got another one here, and this is the Instamic. The Instamic is basically a mic-sized field recorder that works with your phone and clips to your chest. This is got 2 strikes against it, and I actually wrote that down in the show notes. First of all, there in the demo video, they're showing it as like this beautiful mic that you can walk around with, but it's rather large. This thing is fairly bulky compared to a regular lav mic. Now, the other thing is it's on Indiegogo. And if you guys aren't familiar with crowdsourcing, there are 2 platforms mainly that are competing against each other. You have Kickstarter and you have Indiegogo. Kickstarter says if you don't get to your limit, you don't get funded. Indiegogo says it doesn't really matter if you get to your limit, you'll get funded no matter what. Now, this has surpassed its threshold, and it seems to be growing exponentially. But I'm not a big fan of Indiegogo or Kickstarters in general, so I try not to promote them too much. But Mitch, what do you think about this lav mic? Are you going to try and use your cell phone with something like this?
The reason this was very interesting to me, and I'm going to tell you a little story. I don't know if you've ever heard of Grant Peel. He's a guy that works with still motion. You know, still motion, the guys, Patrick Moreau and the crew.
I'm just going to say no, because every time you bring up a name, I draw a blank. So,
well, all right. So here it is. I actually have it handy. For those of you watching, I am holding up a movie DVD. I actually have a DVD in my hands called I'm Fine, Thanks. Grant is the guy that produced this movie, and it's a wonderful movie. If you ever get the chance to watch it, it is on pay-per-view, or you can order the DVD. It's about people who break out of the mold and quit their day job and go do what they really have a passion for, even though they may not make a whole lot of money at it. It's a fascinating little movie. And in fact, part of the story is the fact that they shot the movie as they went traveling, okay, to interview a whole bunch of people. And Grant quit his job in order to make the movie as a passion project. He's a fascinating guy. I've talked to him several times. So anyway, sidebar there. Was talking to him recently, and he said, Mitch, I'm wanting to shoot more home movies. I've got 2 boys. They're really crazy. We love to go out but I want my kids mic'd, right? I want a lav mic on them constantly because I want to be able to turn the camera on and off and still have a way of getting a mic. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, after talking to him about that, this pops up. And he's like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. So in situations like he's talking about with home movies, because he wants to make cinematic home movies, right? If you can slap something like this on your kid and have them walk away, run away, do whatever kids do, they don't always do what you want them to do, and be able to capture the audio from their person at any point in time, he wanted that. And I think that's kind of the purpose for something like this. It could be especially good for like drone shots and stuff if you want to have a mic situation, mic on your body while you're shooting drone shots or whatever. I don't know. But I can see all sorts of uses for something like this. I was hoping to see it be smaller. I think that's why the black one is probably selling more, because it's a little bit less visible than the big old white one. I mean, they're both the same size, don't get me wrong, but I think white is probably going to be harder to hide on somebody's person than the black one. And yes, they're bigger than you would like, but at the same time, they probably have a lot of great functionality.
Yeah, there are 2 models that are basically in this Indiegogo campaign. One is a 129 waterproof version, which is the Pro GoPro-esque, like extreme sports style unit, and then the other one is just a plain Jane unit for $99. The price is very nice for these, and I guess for something like that, I've never really thought about making high-end home movies of kids or anything. I don't have any children, so that's never like struck me as a thing to do. But I suppose for something like that, you're right, this could be like an easy, affordable way for someone to break into wireless audio without having to invest a bunch of money and still be in that range where you could film your children with like a point and shoot camera or something like that. For me personally, I don't know. I would almost say spend a little bit extra money and get a VHF transmitter or a UHF transmitter. Some of the real small ones, like the Airplane Micro from, I believe that is a Zoom product. That guy is in the 269 range, and it's a full-fledged wireless system on the UHF frequency. And then you're recording directly to your camera, as opposed to, it looks like this utilizes your phone for recording. They picture it with the GoPro. Do you know how that interfaces? Does it actually send audio to the GoPro, or is that just to show you that it's extreme and waterproof?
There is a connection with the GoPro, which I have not fully understood and spent the time to dive into. The guys from Instamic have been answering a couple of questions over on the Planet 5D blog post. And for example, they talk about capturing sounds on the ground while you're flying your drone, because somebody asked about that specifically. And it says, let us talk to GoPro and add this amazing feature to their app. The person was asking about generating a tone in a car horn. Or this allowed GoPro apps to trigger all the cameras and mics at once. So there is a connection between the GoPro. What I'm trying to say, stumbling around my words, is that yes, the GoPro, and there is an app that the GoPro has, and so they're trying to make those two talk together. So when you have a mic and a GoPro and the GoPro app, you'll be able to trigger them simultaneously.
Yeah,
so they're working on that stuff.
That would be nice if when you loaded your footage into GoPro's little Cineform editor, that it would just grab the audio and sync it for you based on some sort of time code that was sent back and forth via Bluetooth between the units.
Right. Well, the The GoPro is awesome for doing video, right? But it sucks for audio. It doesn't have, it has a stinky little mic, but
you can actually make the newer GoPro perform fairly well for audio applications. There's a USB to 3.5 millimeter adapter for the Hero Black 4 edition and previous models. And if you hook that in, the latest model, the 4, is fairly good audio interface. It's good about capturing audio. You can plug a Rode Video Mic Pro into it and get fairly decent audio out of it. You can also plug wireless units, but the problem is then you're breaking the case. So
Right.
now there's no water seal for the GoPro itself. So then you're getting into that, well, what happens if I get water on it? Is, what's the point of an extreme camera if it's not extreme? So I don't know. Wireless would probably be the best. This looks cool though. I am interested to find out more about it. I'm probably not going to spend $99 as I own a ton of Mica gear, but go check out the Indiegogo page or the full write-up over at Planet 5D for more info on that. We'll have links to that in the show notes. Another kind of oddball thing that came out this week is actually the Tokina 24-70 f2.8 lens. This is a $1,000 lens, and it seems kind of odd. If you're not familiar with Tokina, one of their claims to fame was the 11-16 millimeter f2.8. This was a very wide angle lens for APS-C sensors. That lens is very popular because it's a very affordable wide angle lens. It's a very good lens. It's sharp. It's got some weird features like the weird click slide ring, and that's a pretty common feature for Tokina lenses. This is coming out at a time when we already have the Tamron 24-70 f2.8 with vibration control, which is image stabilization. And there's even rumors that Canon is going to be releasing a 24-70 millimeter f2.8 image stabilized lens. At $1,000, that puts it a little bit more expensive than the Tamron 24-70 f2.8, which I actually have, love, and use right here. So do you think this lens is relevant? Has Tokina missed the mark?
You're asking me, Mr. Lens Guy. I think there are a lot of 24-70 lenses on the market. There aren't very many, obviously, at the f2.8 range. And with the newer lenses coming out from the other manufacturers you just mentioned, they may have missed the market. But I want to ask you a question, seeing as how there's a lot of things that you know that I don't know. I notice in the write-up on the digitalpicture.com that you linked to, they have a one-touch focus mechanism. And I'm constantly bothered, at least on the Canon lenses, because if you want to switch from AF to manual focus, from autofocus to manual focus, there's a tiny little switch that you have to push. And it's true on many other lenses. But they say that if you simply snap the focus ring forward, then autofocus is on. And if you push it back, then it's in manual focus. Have you ever used that? Does it work?
Yeah, it's sort of obnoxious, actually.
Is it?
It's for photography, it's not too bad. And I'm actually going to show the lens here so that everybody can kind of see this. For audio listeners, just use your imagination. Basically, if you think about the barrel of the lens on a Tokina lens, it's got a really nice beefy focus ring, but in order to use it, you actually pull it back like a sort of like you're pumping a shotgun. So it clicks back and you can see two lines on there. One line says AF and the other one says MF. And that's how you actually engage the focus ring to manual mode. So it is nice in the fact that you have a big ring to pull back. But the problem is you can still engage autofocus with it in that mode. So you can grind gears if you're not careful. It's sort of weird too, because a lot of people will click it over by accident and then forget, and then they're trying to focus and it doesn't work correctly. Right. Whereas with your Canon glass or even like a Tamron glass, you have an actual little switch that says on and off. This one, it covers up autofocus when you have it in manual focus. So if you're not familiar with the lens, you're like, hey, is this just a manual lens? Like, does it have autofocus? What's the deal with that? It does feel really good. And on the 11-16, when you click that over, it's a very satisfying click and ka-chunk to get it into that mode. And the ring's really heavy and thick, but not my thing. I was always kind of complaining about that feature on Tokina lenses. Does that sound better to you than the switch itself? Do you like the idea of sort of chucking your lens back like that?
I was looking for some other way of realizing that a lens is in manual focus versus autofocus, because I mean, periodically I switch, right? I think everybody maybe switches periodically, and hunting for it, if you're doing something, trying to do it quickly, to flip that switch on a Canon lens is a pain in the butkus. I mean, maybe people that do it all the time get more used to it, but I can never find it when I want it. So I was just thinking when I was reading the story that if I could just pull the lens in or push the lens out quickly, it would be easier to do quickly. But I can see your point being that many people would forget and not remember how to switch it back and forth and stuff like that. So I was just curious to see how well it worked, and I knew you would know the answer because I'm sure you've used every lens on the market.
I've used a lot of them. Now, one thing I did run into, and I worked with this guy on a couple shoots, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to pull his card or anything, but every time I put a lens on a camera, he would immediately go over and switch it to manual. And because I was used to working with the AF as a pre-trigger, it actually ruined a couple of shots until I figured out what the hell was going on. And I'm like, what are you doing? And every time, like, I would set up a camera, get it ready to go, and then he would walk over and click the switch. And then I was in the boat that you're talking about where I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. Why isn't this focusing? What's going on here? And that was his thing. Like every lens, as soon as he put it on a camera body, he shot in manual focus only. He believed that AF was the worst thing in the world and that you should only ever use manual focus. And we had a long talk, and I was in charge, so I just told him to do it this way, and it was done. But it was just kind of weird, and it messed me up. And then I actually had to go find these switches on all these lenses because he'd gone through my bag and started clicking them all over to manual focus. Like, so I was just getting them ready for you so that they're ready to go when we start shooting. I'm like, you messing me up. And so, yeah. And then with this one, you hand this over to somebody and they're like, how do I get it into autofocus? Because Tokina is literally the only brand that I know of that has that sort of auto manual transfer click over system. So if you've only used Canon lenses or other branded lenses and you've never used a Tokina lens, you're going to be confused by this guy in general until you get used to that whole click ring thing. And it's something you almost have to like show somebody right out of the gate so that they know what they're doing. If you hand someone the lens and say, put it on the camera and go, if it's in manual, they may not be able to figure out that you push the thing forward because it's a fairly, solid clicking mechanism.
Right.
Just a weird in general design. I don't like it, but a lot of people love it. So, take it or leave it, whatever you want. Now, rolling on down the line here, we've got an audio interface. We've talked about the Road Link, and that was a Wi-Fi frequency-enabled audio transmitter. We also talked about the Instamic, which is a wireless microphone system. This is a little pricier, kind of sits above the Road Link. It's the Audio-technica System 10, a Wi-Fi wireless system. Basically, this is doing the exact same thing as you get out of the Road Link. Price is a little bit higher. This is about $50 more. It does have a cute, super thin lav mic.
Cute.
It looks like it's built pretty solidly. You've been messing around with the Road Link. First, I kind of want to get your impressions on the Road Link, and then looking at the specs for this and the design. Do you think this is an improvement over the Road Link, or do you think they're kind of in the same ballpark? Is it worth $50 extra?
Well, now you're take that for a grain of salt. Video, because there's a lot of awesome information in there. They do a really good job. Okay, I am a B&H affiliate too, so
as am I. We're both very happy to be B&H affiliates.
The video is really well done, though. Interesting points that I saw in the video that I think are distinctly different than the Road Link. Number one, the Audio-technica has a headphone jack. My brain is just not engaged right today. I'm sorry. So it has a headphone jack that the Rode Link doesn't have. Now, the caveat there is that you're getting the audio on the receiver, and it's not exactly what you're getting in the camera, but that's a situation. So, you know, what's actually being recorded on the camera could be very different. You could be peaking and everything else, but it at least has a headphone jack. If you don't have any headphone jack on your camera, you could at least get an idea that the audio coming in is okay, right?
Yeah.
There, with that big caveat that that's not your final audio. It's just the difference between the Rode Link and the Audio-technica. The other thing that I think was pointed out in the B&H is that the Audio-technica will only work one at a time. If you buy multiple transmitters, then at least this is the impression that I got from the B&H video, was that you can't do multiples, because they specifically talked about, so you're using it maybe on stage and you have multiple presenters. We have to turn presenter A's off before presenter B's works. And with the Rode Link system, you can have multiple transmitters working with one receiver at the same time. And so I'm not totally convinced that those are totally different yet. I didn't dive in because I just watched the video just before the show. So that concerned me. And maybe somebody knows the right answer, but just be careful of that particular issue if that's important to you.
So the way I understood it going through the Audio-technica System 10 was that basically you could bond it with up to 8 units, I believe, and then whichever one was on was the one that would automatically link to it. So you turned one transmitter off, and the next one, as soon as it comes on, will link automatically with the receiver. Does the Rode man, I'm doing it. Does
It's the Rode Link.
Yes, does the
and
Rode
that's
Link
where
allow multiple audio sources to come in simultaneously?
and that's what I don't know. I mean, I apologize because I don't have multiple Rode Link transmitters to be able to test, but to me as a filmmaker, I would want to be able to have that as an option, because let's say I'm doing a 2-person interview. I want both transmitters to work at the same time, right? I want to be able to get both sources of audio. And again, I haven't actually tested that, so I'm assuming that's the way it works, but maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe you need to have 2 receivers, in which case you're screwed.
Yeah, I don't know on the Rode Link yet. I would like to look into that a little bit more. So that's something that we can maybe table for another podcast. But as far as the Audio-technica system goes, I do like the 4-pin barrel connectors that they use on Audio-technica systems, because it's like a slide lock clip sort of thing. A lot of the other lav mic systems are just a mic plugging in directly. The clip system is nice. This also has frequency diversity, time space diversity as well. So that means that it can hop frequencies in the 2.4 gigahertz range up and down. It uses multiple time slots when it's sending audio out to check and recheck the audio. And then it also has double antennas at both units, so that it can change from one antenna to the other depending on which side of the unit you're walking on. I don't see external antennas on the Rode Link, so I'm not sure how the antenna system is set up, and there are ways to put 2 antennas in there so that it could be pretty much identical. It looks like a lot of these Wi-Fi units are working off of the same chipset that became available about 8 months ago, 9 months ago, that we were seeing in sort of off-brand Korean models and so on. Now we're seeing that sort of working in more robust, more developed companies that make this sort of thing. So I think they're all going to probably be on the same level, and it's just going to be dependent on what you get as far as microphones go and so on. So take a listen to watch the B&H video. It's pretty interesting. Go look at the Rode Link. I think either one of them will probably fit the bill. I don't know which one's better. I want to test them and find out, but that's for another day. Now, moving on down the line before we get out of here, because I'm running a little short on time. I've got this wacky guy right here. This is the Z camera. I don't know what the heck is going on here? But if you can read Japanese, you can click on the link in the show notes and find out basically what this appears to be. And just because I'm translating this from a bunch of pictures that show sort of a bit of information, this looks like a sort of a Blackmagic Micro Studio designed Micro Four Thirds camera. It's a plain Jane version of that. It's just a square box with a 60 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor. It has AF, and it's designed basically only to work remotely. So it's a sensor in a tiny box with an adapter for Micro Four Thirds lenses, and that's it. It's completely in Japanese. So as far as tech specs, pricing, everything else, I can't tell you anything about this guy other than it's coming out at some point, and it looks really interesting in a weird sort of like action cam, possibly used for drones or something like that sort of way. Mitch, what do you think about this guy?
Well, you don't remember because it was so long ago and you moved, but and I was just looking around the room because it's in a pile of paper somewhere. But I actually talked to those guys at NAB.
Oh, nice.
They were in the very start. You remember when we were talking about the God, names are not working today. The Logger's Lunchbox.
Yes.
That crew was in the booth right behind them. And the guys at Logger's Lunchbox said, hey, you got to go check that camera out because it's really awesome. And this was, of course, just right after the Blackmagic announcement had come out. But it's awesome. And the guys were like really excited about it. And the video they were showing on their monitor was really awesome. And they were going to send me a unit. And I got to dig out their business card because I haven't gotten one yet. They were going to go through a Kickstarter thing, but they were going to send me one. And it looked, like you said, it looks really awesome. The video on their monitors looked really awesome. And I think this is something that people are going to. So I held up the flyer to you when I just got back from NAB. So if you were back in one of the old podcasts, I actually had the flyer for that.
Nice.
But of course you don't remember that. But it's something we need to keep an eye on because I think it was like, was the price $649 or something?
Yeah, it was something
600?
really reasonable. Now that you mention it, I'm kind of like
good.
revealing my memory. But man,
because
I
the
get so
Blackmagic is $1,000.
Yeah, exactly.
This
Actually, I
one
think
was-
isn't the studio $1,200?
Yeah, it's $1,000 or more. I don't, they came out with so many private products at NAB, but this looks to be an awesome thing. It's not. Blackmagic has a reputation of not delivering on time. Well, these guys haven't even started their Kickstarter yet, so it may be a lot farther out than even Blackmagic, but the pricing was awesome and it looked pretty dang cool.
I really like the idea of a utilitarian box that just plugs in and you hook it onto stuff and then you go. It kind of is the dream of a GoPro with a Micro Four Thirds lens mount.
Right.
It's cool. I like the idea. And when this came up, one of my news feeds, I saw it again and I was like, ooh, that looks sweet. And then, I forgot we'd even talked about this.
Yep.
That was so many moons ago. I get busy, man. This though, go check it out. It's called the Z Cam. There's links in the show notes to the Japanese site. Maybe you can find something that's translated. Mitch, if you find the literature or if you got an email on it, shoot me a line. I'd love to hear more about this camera. I don't know what sensor it's using. 16 megapixel sort of sounds familiar to every other 16 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor on the market. So this could be a GH4 style sensor stuck into a blank box. The only thing I would say, if it is in the $600 price range, now that we have stuff like the G7 from Panasonic, does that mean that the price on this should be much lower than that? Maybe $400 or $500? Because that's a full-fledged camera system with a screen and, everything.
Right.
And this is a box with a sensor. So where's the price drop, and I don't know the actual pricing on this, but just kind of going with the $600 mark, it would seem that was putting it pretty close to some of the lower priced Micro Four Thirds 4K shooting cameras that are out there on the market.
Right. If I remember correctly, wasn't the Black Magic a smaller sensor than a Micro Four Thirds? Wasn't it like a 1 inch
No, I
sensor or
believe it is
something?
a Micro Four Thirds. Well, it's a Micro Four Thirds adapter. You actually might be right on the sensor size. I'm correcting myself as I correct you. Sorry.
That's okay.
So
It's hard to remember all this stuff, DJ. Believe me.
Yeah, for those of you not familiar with the time frame here, Mitch and I are a few hours apart. So I do Mitch's cast sometimes when I have to go to work early at like 5:30 in the morning. So my brain, no start's good. Not to work.
Yeah,
Okay.
amen.
But yeah, so check this out. It looks pretty cool. I'm excited about it. I kind of want to mess around with it. I like in general the idea of just strapping a Micro Four Thirds sensor to the back of a lens. That's why I was really excited about the Air from Olympus and some of the other adapter types stuff like that. So hopefully this is a good product. Hopefully it comes out. Hopefully we see something more from the Z camera. They do have an official announcement on it, so I wonder if they're skipping the Kickstarter process and going straight to the public. We'll have to wait and see on this camera. Mitch, do you have anything to add on this guy before we get out of here?
No, let's get out of here.
All right, guys. We're cutting the show short today because we got a production meeting this morning. So I am out skis. But Mitch, where can people find you on the internet?
.com. Planet 5D. Thanks, DJ. It's great talking to you.
No problem. You can find this podcast on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and anywhere else podcasts are distributed. It's also on YouTube, so check that out if you want to watch the video version. We will talk to you again next week on another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. All right. I
got a kick out of watching your video, the one you did about the Kippen adapter.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read down in the comments. AK says, I was hoping for the old choir singing subscribe ending.
I just shot and actually when you were talking about GoPro, I just walked out on a trail real quick with a GoPro and a Rode video mic and shot it, one-handed like this really quick. And I mean, it's cool.
Worked great.
Yeah. Actually, so this is before I get out of here, I'm testing it some more. I actually set up sort of an official rig here.
This
is the EOS M with the 22 millimeter, and it gives you just enough focus distance to get the screen completely in focus and test the autofocus speed on this guy.
Perfect.
So there'll be a full review coming up probably next week when I get a chance to sit down and edit all the footage together. But for the most part, it's positive. It does still have some glitches, and I've talked with those guys. I think they're coming out with a firmware update for it to correct those, so keep an eye out for that. But I really do actually have to go. So
okay, goodbye.
Goodbye for the people who got the extra bit at the end. Later.